Okay. Hello, everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my topic for the day, which is develop team resilience while leading remotely. And before we get started, I want to say thank you to Enrique and Hacking HR for doing this because we certainly are living through difficult times, and we're all trying to do our best to figure out how to go through this experience that the entire world is going through in such a way that when we get out on the other side, because we will, that we are wiser and this experience has hopefully changed us for the better. And that's my perspective and my hope. And that is what I'm bringing to this conversation this morning. So my topic, the reason why I came to do this was one, because I, for one, have been working remotely for years, since my early days working as a consultant, where I traveled a lot and at times I was with clients or I was on new teams. Working remotely and working in teams has been something I've been doing for well over 12 years. So I have a lot of insight in how, from the perspective of both the leader and the manager leading a team, how they can do it more effectively. And also as somebody who is part of a team, how can you better support yourself, your team, and your organization in such a way right now that you can still be productive. But productivity is not our number one priority right now. It's important, but also being able to take care of ourselves and doing the things we need to do to ensure that we are healthy is just as important. So since I'm both a coach and as well as a consultant, I like to take in both of these things into consideration because I think we can get lost in this desire, especially during moments of crisis, to want to over-focus on being productive and working, but at the same time, perhaps neglecting other things such as our health. And without our health, we are unable to work or live or survive. So that is something that I think we really need to keep in mind during the next few weeks and even months. So to get started, I have a question that's on this slide that I would like for some of you to think about, and I'll come back and I'll ask the question again. I can see some of your responses. So I would love for you to think about what type of leader would you say that your colleagues say you were before March 1st, 2020. So before this pandemic started to overtake the world, if people were to characterize you in a particular way, what would they say about you? What words would they use to describe you, define you, characterize who you are as a leader, as a manager, as a colleague? I want you to really think about that during the next few minutes. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you that question again. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a consultant. I'm also a facilitator for the American Management Association, where I teach a number of courses on women in leadership and a number of other seminars as well. My company is called We Are Artemis Leadership. It is a consulting company that is based on the idea of how do we embody a more expansive view of leadership at every level of an organization. And so a lot of my work is focused around making sure that when you bring yourself to work, it is not just the idea of just bringing your whole self, but is bringing a self to world that you're comfortable with, and then that in the organizations create an environment so that everybody can thrive and everybody has a chance to know what motivates them, what is their purpose, and how do they get their work done in a way that makes sense for everyone. So I would love for you to, if you have any questions, if you want to visit my website to learn more about my company, the information is here on the screen. I also recently was motivated by this what's going on right now to start a YouTube channel, and the focus is on resilience. And so I actually had my first episode come out last week. Please go and take a look, and you'll get even more than what I'm able to share during the next few minutes about how we can be more resilient and how we can move ourselves through this entire this crisis in a way that allows us to be to survive and then to thrive when we get on the other side. So to get started, our first learning objective and our singular learning objective for the next few minutes is we are looking at how can you better collaborate with your team in a way that you create a culture that is defined by norms, developing greater trust, and being much more transparent during the quarantine. What are the 3 things that you can do right now to ensure within your teams that your norms, your trust, and your transparency come together in a cogent way? So I studied anthropology, and that informs itself a lot into my work. And so a lot of what I do is about looking at culture, looking at people, and looking at how we create shared meaning in our organizations. And a crucial aspect of developing resiliency, which is the ability to bounce back from adversity, the ability to move through change in such a way that you're stronger when you get on the other side, is the environment that you've created, that you have around you. So one of the things that is important to look at is the norms that an organization creates. Now, very often, when we think about norms and values, we're thinking about the shared activities, the shared set of beliefs that we have in an organization, the shared purpose that we have, what it is that we are doing in the world, what are we creating, what service are we providing. Those are all things that make up the culture of an organization. Now, the challenge is during good times, when everything is normal, norms and values and shared purpose allows us to get from point A to point B. However, in moments of crisis, in moments of, like right now, what ends up happening is if your culture, if the norm in your organization, for example, is one where people don't speak up very much, they're reticent to speak up. And maybe they're reticent to speak up because of they don't know what kind of retribution or what kind of challenge may come their way if they ask the wrong question, or if they feel that they may be targeted. That's a norm during good times when everything is going smoothly. Most organizations, that's not going to destroy the organization. That is not going to that pretty much won't derail the organization. However, during times of crisis or challenges, when you do need people to speak up, you do need them to be proactive, to brainstorm, to come up with new ideas, to solve problems in a much faster way. If you have a culture where people are afraid to speak up, it's going to be further exacerbated. Because what's going to happen is when you do need people to speak up, they won't. Because they might be afraid, they might feel that they might be a target if they speak up. So in a way, the values of that organization is one where silence and also always looking up towards leadership is what's valued in that organization. Now, when things are very difficult, that makes it very difficult for an organization to pivot effectively, because the culture and the norm that's been set up is one which people are constantly waiting for direction to be given to them. So that is one way in which, if an organization has leaned more in that direction, it makes it more difficult for that organization to be resilient in times like this. I recently came across, I'm not sure it was an article or a quote on LinkedIn, where there was a perspective that a lot of companies right now that have not been okay with or learning or to better understand how remote work cultures work, right now it's very difficult for them because they've never done this. And so this is increasingly becoming a challenge because this was something that was never valued in the past. So now a lot of organizations are finding themselves in situations where they have to quickly pivot, they have to adapt, they still want to maintain productivity, but the learning curve is very steep because there just hasn't been an opportunity to really think about how do we make sure when we are doing our workforce planning that we have some sort of contingency plan for when any type of crisis occurs, how are we able to pivot in a way that is quick? So the playbook is basically being written right now as organizations are going through many of these challenges. I'm going to take a quick look to see if anybody answered some of the questions. Okay, my earlier question. So someone said they believe that their leaders others see them as being authentic, being supportive. That's great. Being seen as, supportive leader, being authentic. What else do I see here? Okay, so I've gotten some interesting engagement. Thank you all for being compassionate, for providing some of your suggestions. This is all really helpful because a lot of what I'm talking about is showing that greater compassion, showing empathy, which often organizations will focus on, okay, these are the tools you need. Okay, go on Zoom, go on Slack, go on Asana, go on all these different tools to work. But if not enough guidance is being provided, like whether it's governance or guidance to allow people to have a better understanding of how do we use these tools, it just becomes, they're given frameworks and tools, but at the same time, there isn't really a sense of, okay, how do we make this work with how we are right now? How do we still create an environment where we can still be effective, but at the same time, I can maybe work 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours or 3 hours in the evening. And how do you have those types of conversations with your leader or with your team right now? So the next thing that I think is really important for us to think through is the idea of trust. First, we talked about norms, the importance of setting culture. Now it's how do you think about how to build trust. The earlier speaker, he did a great job talking about telling stories, how to better motivate, even talked a little bit about resilience and all of these types of concepts that are really crucial right now for us to feel a greater sense of, even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, to still feel like to still try to bring some normalcy into our life. And when you are leading a team or you're working with others, being able to create some sense of normalcy, being able to establish a sense of, okay, yes, things are very difficult, but at the same time, these are some of the things we can start doing to ensure that we can continue to work in a way that allows us to get our work done, but still be approachable and compassionate towards each other. So I have a few ideas that I've shared here. So the first is, how do we enable people to cope with change? Some people have better coping skills than others. And if you are someone who have gone through major life changes or transitions in your life in the past, or you know somebody in your team who has and they're open to sharing, now could be an opportunity for us, for those who may not have such good coping skills, to perhaps learn from each other. So creating ways to share, whether it's on Slack, which is a very informal tool that allows people to go in and create little mini communities where you have an opportunity to talk about, okay, these are some of the things that I'm dealing with right now. Who might have some ideas of how I could better cope with this? Another thing to keep in mind is to make sure that you establish predictable communication with your teammates and with your direct reports right now. Whether it's setting up weekly meetings, meeting twice a week at a particular time, or every morning, even if it's just 5-minute check-in on WhatsApp or on Zoom, but ensuring that there is a way to keep a predictable flow of communication, because many people are just not used to not going into an office every day. And for those who may work or live at home, that's a real challenge right now. Being more flexible with time, and understanding that some people have children, some do not. How do we ensure that we have enough flexibility built into how we are working is super crucial right now. Giving people permission to be more autonomous. Autonomy is something that the vast majority of employees want that. People know how they work, they know how and when they're the most effective. So giving people the autonomy they need to get their work done without micromanaging right now would be a big plus, and something that will allow you as a leader, as a manager, to be more proactive, thinking about how to solve your existing issues or new challenges that might come up. So allowing yourself to free up your time by giving greater autonomy to others is an area that is an opportunity for many leaders right now. Another thing to keep in mind as well is, how do you better pivot and adapt, and how do you allow that to happen is when you can allow for greater decentralization of your culture. Being able to quickly change course allows a level of understanding that there is a level of vulnerability that goes with that, but it gives the person the space to know that they might make a mistake, but even if they do make a mistake, that they're not going to be unduly punished for that, but they are empowered enough to get their work done in a way that makes sense to them. And a few other things to keep in mind as well is how do you better provide guidance? And you can do that by modifying your team culture. You can think through, okay, there are different tools of things that you can use to still better motivate each other, to stay on task, to get work done, but at the same time, again, allowing people to have the level of autonomy that they need right now. And the last two things as well to keep in mind is making new agreements with your team. This is very important because things have changed. Creating new agreements allows everyone an opportunity to speak up about what it is they might need right now. And what they might need on Monday might be very different from what they might need next week or on Friday. So constantly making new agreements and allows for greater accountability between you and your team as you're working, because you're on the same page and there's less of an opportunity for you to lose communication or for things to get lost in translation along the way. And then lastly, leading and managing for uncertainty is knowing that there are a lot of things we cannot control right now. The things that we can control are perhaps in our immediate environment. So keeping that in mind and just being a little bit more compassionate with those around you at the moment. Okay, and lastly, transparency. Right now, people are trying to make sense of what is going on in the world. And as a leader, this is one of the greatest opportunities that you have to build trust with others, those who report to you, your peers. It is creating an opportunity to ensure that people can look to you, not just for direction, but also for compassion, for greater empathy, that you have the capacity within you to motivate and encourage others, even when you may not have all the answers and you really don't know what tomorrow will look like or next week. Like, you just have no idea, but at the same time, helping to put things into context and inspiring others. And this may not be very easy because very often, most of us we're in work mode. We have deadlines to meet, metrics to meet, goals that we have to achieve, but taking the time to step back and really motivate your team, motivate your peers right now is just as important as the actual production of work. So keeping things in mind, like greater motivation of others, helping others to make meaning of what is happening, is, particularly, I believe, for younger people who haven't had enough life experiences to, to see more into a future that is different. When you've had more life experiences, you've had more opportunity to see the ebb and flows of life and certain dips, and also great moments. So being able to stand in the gap for others, that is something that coaches do a lot. And those are some, there are skills in coaching that many leaders right now can utilize to be in greater service to those who they are leading. And so that's something I would encourage many of you to do is, if you have the time to learn more or look for support, whether it's from a coach or to find more information online about what can you do? How can you also right now develop an area of yourself that you perhaps haven't focused on in a long time, but the moment in the time is asking you to do more of that. And also, in addition to using some of those coaching skills that could be very useful and beneficial to your team, also thinking about how do you better coordinate workflow, whether it's the cadence of your meetings, the virtual culture that you put into place. You may think that you haven't done that, but we're 3 weeks, many of us 3 weeks into being at home, into this quarantine, you've already set up a culture. Now, whether it's a culture that reflects and mimics your existing culture at work or it's a new one, you've already created it by virtue of your activities, the way you communicate, what you prioritize and what you don't. So since you've already done it, what I would like for you to do at this moment is kind of step back and think about, am I happy with the culture, the virtual culture that I've created? Is there anything that I could do differently? And what can I add that I haven't done? And am I spending enough time getting feedback from my team to better understand what challenges they're dealing with right now? And so just creating ways, as many different channels or opportunities as possible to give people a chance to show up, not just with what they're producing, but with where they are right now in their lives and what their needs may be. And so my last, and this is the question that I had at the beginning, was what type of leader, the beginning I asked is what type of leader were you before March 1st, 2020? And now I'm asking you, what type of leader do you believe your team needs today? The leadership that you may have provided 2 months ago or 3 months ago may no longer be as useful or as relevant right now, or there may be a few things you may need to do to modify certain leadership traits or characteristics that perhaps you've developed and effectively for the last few years, but you may need to modify them just a bit during the next couple of weeks or next few months to allow your team, your organization to still be productive, but at the same time to still remember what we're going through right now is unheard of. It's new to all of us, and there are people who have family members, who have friends, people who are close to them that they may never get to say, they will never get to say goodbye to them. And so that is changing our very nature and our experiences. And so just being mindful, if you don't always know who may be going through something very difficult, so keeping that in mind as you lead, and leading with compassion. We've all seen, unfortunately, horror stories of people who are in the front lines right now, medical professionals, people who work at warehouses, or organizations, very well-known brands that we all know and we all use, and many organizations are not stepping up adequately. And I implore all of us to take a lesson. Let this be a lesson to many of us as leaders, to not do some of the things that we've been seeing that certain organizations have been doing, and for us to do it differently and to be more mindful of that. We have an opportunity right now to build great loyalty, to build trust with in our organizations when we do right by people, and when we provide them with the resources that they need, and we also provide them with the support that they need to still be human, because they're not just resources. We are all people, and allowing that to be still a central part of how we work, I think is very important. So again, thank you for participating in my session. And as you think about resiliency, to me, it is much more than just always going full speed ahead. It's also being able to step back, take stock, and also look within and see what it is that I can do right now. What do I have the capacity to do right now? And also knowing your limits of what you can and cannot do. Again, thank you very much. My name is Milka, and I am the founder of We Are Artemis Leadership, based in Miami. And it's been my pleasure to participate in this session with all of you. Thank you.